On the morning of November 29, 2019, a black Toyota Land Cruiser Prado was found stuck in a palm oil plantation. At first, a passing farmer assumed that someone had simply parked there to rest. However, as he got closer, he saw a man lying motionless in the back seat, his body already turning blue. Panicked, the farmer quickly alerted the local villagers, who then contacted the police. Officers rushed to the scene and identified the victim as Jamaluddin, a senior judge at the Medan District Court. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, as Jamaluddin was a well-respected figure in the legal world. His body was immediately transported to the hospital for an autopsy. Born in 1964, Jamaluddin had built an esteemed career in the judiciary, known for his integrity, authority, and dedication to justice. His professional life seemed flawless, earning admiration from colleagues and the public alike. But behind his distinguished reputation, a dark and deadly plot was unfolding, one that would lead to his tragic end. News of his death spread rapidly, devastating his family and those who knew him. His eldest daughter from his first marriage, Kenny Akbari, was heartbroken and demanded justice for her father. Meanwhile, Zuraida Hanum, Jamaluddin's second wife, collapsed in tears upon hearing of his death. Neighbors and relatives tried to console her, but her overwhelming grief stood out, perhaps even a little too much. Zuraida Hanum, born in 1978, was Jamaluddin's second wife. The two married in 2011 after meeting at a formal event. At the time, Jamaluddin was a widower, and Zuraida was a divorcee. They quickly grew close and decided to marry just months after their initial meeting. To the outside world, their marriage seemed happy, almost enviable. No one suspected that beneath the surface, their relationship was crumbling. As investigators examined the crime scene, they noticed something unusual. There were no signs of robbery, and none of Jamaluddin's valuables were missing. This ruled out the possibility of a random attack or a botched theft. The police quickly became suspicious. This was no accident. It was a carefully planned murder. An autopsy later confirmed that Jamaluddin had not died in a car crash. He had been suffocated to death. There were clear signs of forceful asphyxiation, including bruises around his neck and face, indicating that someone had smothered him until he stopped breathing. The realization sent chills down the spines of investigators. This was cold-blooded murder. With the case now classified as a homicide, detectives turned their attention to the people closest to the victim. They visited Jamaluddin's home and reviewed CCTV footage from his neighborhood. Strangely, no unknown individuals had entered or exited his house on the night of his murder. This pointed to an unsettling possibility. The killer wasn't an outsider. It was someone he knew. Neighbors and colleagues shared troubling details. They recalled frequent arguments between Jamaluddin and his wife, Zuraida. Though they appeared to be a perfect couple in public, those close to them knew otherwise. The marriage had been troubled for some time. Some witnesses even recalled hearing heated fights between the two. As the police closely observed Zuraida's behavior, more red flags emerged. Although she had dramatically collapsed in front of mourners, some family members found her reaction insincere. It seemed more like an act than genuine grief. Her inconsistencies deepened their suspicions. Their doubts were confirmed when they examined Jamaluddin's phone records. Among his last messages and calls, there was a disturbing pattern. Frequent communication between Zuraida and a man named Jefri Pratama. Witnesses recognized Jefri as someone often seen with Zuraida. The nature of their relationship soon became clear. Under surveillance, Zuraida's movements were tracked, along with those she interacted with. Then, on January 8, 2020, police made their move. They arrested 3 individuals suspected of orchestrating the murder: Zuraida Hanum, Jefri Pratama, and another man named Reza Fahlevi. Brought in for questioning, all 3 initially denied any involvement. But as the evidence stacked against them, phone records, testimonies, and forensic findings, they broke. The truth was more sinister than anyone had imagined. For months, Zuraida had been planning her husband's murder. Feeling trapped in an unhappy marriage, she had found comfort in Jefri Pratama, a 42-year-old man she met at her child's school. Their relationship began as casual conversations among parents but quickly escalated into a passionate affair. Jefri, working as a driver at the time, became Zuraida's escape. In their private meetings, she would complain about her husband, describing Jamaluddin as a distant and neglectful man. Fueled by their growing infatuation, they began discussing ways to solve her problem permanently. At first, Jefri hesitated, but Zuraida's promises of a future together, free from Jamaluddin, eventually convinced him. By early 2019, they had already attempted to hire someone to kill Jamaluddin, but the plan failed when their hired hitman backed out. Determined, Zuraida and Jefri decided to take matters into their own hands. They enlisted Reza Fahlevi, a 29-year-old acquaintance, to assist them. By late November 2019, the final plan was in place. On the night of November 28, 2019, Zuraida picked up Jefri and Reza in her car and drove them to her home in the Royal Monaco residential area. She led them to the third floor, where they hid, waiting for the right moment. Jamaluddin came home from work late at night, not realizing that the killer was in the house. Zuraida confirmed that her husband's children from his first marriage were not there, leaving only their 7-year-old daughter asleep at home. At around 01 Doro, when Jamaluddin was fast asleep, Zuraida signaled to Jefri and Reza. They quietly infiltrated the main bedroom, where Jamaluddin lay next to his wife. Reza took a cloth from the edge of the bed, placed himself near Jamaluddin's head. Jefri climbed into bed while securing Jamaluddin's hand so he wouldn't fight. Meanwhile, Zuraida pressed her husband's legs, making sure he couldn't move. With swift movements, Reza pressed the cloth tightly over Jamaluddin's mouth and nose, cutting off the air supply. Jamaluddin jolted awake, struggling violently, but Jefri held it as hard as he could, while Zuraida remained motionless, watching the life drain from her husband's eyes. Seconds felt like forever. The time seemed very long. Jamaluddin's desperate attempts to free himself are increasingly weakening. His panicked breathing faded into silence. His wide eyes, once filled with shock and betrayal, stared at Zuraida's face one last time. He stared back, cold and unfeeling. No regrets. Do not hesitate. No breath, no heartbeat. Then, silence. The man who for years upheld justice had just been murdered in his own home by the woman he trusted most. The killers wasted no time. They wrapped Jamaluddin's body in bedsheets and carried it downstairs. He was heavy, but they worked quickly. They placed his lifeless form in the back seat of his own car, making it look like he had fallen asleep there. Zuraida took the wheel, driving deep into a palm plantation while Jefri and Reza kept watch. Once they reached a secluded spot, they adjusted Jamaluddin's body to appear as though he had simply passed out. Leaving the engine running, they abandoned the vehicle and vanished into the night. For a brief moment, they believed they had committed the perfect crime. But justice was already closing in. On July 1, 2020, the Medan District Court handed down its verdict. Zuraida Hanum was sentenced to death. Jefri Pratama received life in prison, while Reza Fahlevi was sentenced to 20 years. As the judge delivered her fate, Zuraida, who had maintained her composure throughout the trial, finally broke down. She wept and pleaded for mercy, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The same way Jamaluddin's final pleas had, Jamaluddin took his last breath at the hands of the person he trusted the most, a judge who upheld the law, only to become the victim of a cold-blooded crime, orchestrated by his own wife. Now, Zuraida Hanum faces justice. The court has sentenced her to death. But the question remains, does she truly deserve this punishment? Is the death penalty enough to pay for such a betrayal and murder? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments.